My stepmom ruined my childhood and made dad miss my graduation. I went no contact. Now he's separated and wants to reconnect. I've always had a complicated relationship with the concept of family. My earliest memories are of just me and my dad, living in a small apartment in the suburbs. My birth mom left when I was barely a year old, and for the longest time, I thought it was something I had done. Kids have a way of blaming themselves for things they can't understand, and I was no exception. My dad did his best to fill both parental roles. He'd work long hours at his construction job, then come home and cook dinner, help me with homework, and read me bedtime stories. On weekends, we'd go to the park or the zoo, just the two of us against the world. I remember feeling so loved and secure during those early years. But as I got older, I started to notice the sadness in my dad's eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. He never dated, always saying that I was enough for him. But I could tell he was lonely. When I was about 8, I remember asking him why I didn't have a mom like the other kids at school. He tried to explain that sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt other people, but that it wasn't my fault. I didn't fully understand then, but I knew it made him sad to talk about it, so I stopped asking. Things changed when I was 10. My dad met Vanessa, 38F, at a friend's barbecue. She was beautiful, outgoing, and seemed to light up the room. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension when my dad introduced us. Vanessa was all smiles, bending down to my level and telling me how pretty I was and how she'd always wanted a daughter. For the next few months, it was like a whirlwind. Vanessa was always around, bringing me little gifts and taking me out for ice cream or to the movies. She'd help me with my homework and even taught me how to braid my hair, something my dad had never quite mastered. I started to imagine what it would be like to have a mom, to have a complete family like my friends at school. My dad proposed to Vanessa on my 11th birthday. I remember feeling so special that they'd chosen to share that moment with me. The wedding was small but beautiful, and I got to be the flower girl. I felt like I was living in a fairy tale. But fairy tales, as it turns out, don't always have happy endings. The change wasn't immediate, but it was noticeable. Vanessa's warm smiles became less frequent, her hugs less enthusiastic. She'd still make sure I had clean clothes and packed lunches for school, but the little extras, the surprise treats, the bedtime stories, those stopped. At first, I thought maybe she was just tired. Being a new mom must be hard, I reasoned. I tried to talk to my dad about it, but he always had an excuse. Vanessa's still adjusting to being a mom, he'd say, or you're just not used to having a woman around the house. I could see the worry in his eyes, though, like he was afraid of losing this new family we'd created. As I entered my teenage years, the distance between Vanessa and me grew. She never came to my school events or sports games. When I got my driver's license at 16, my dad was the one who taught me. Vanessa always had an excuse for why she couldn't help. It hurt, but I tried not to let it show. I didn't want to upset my dad or rock the boat. Things really came to a head when I was 17. I had been working incredibly hard in school, staying up late studying and sacrificing my social life to maintain my grades. When my acceptance letter to my dream college arrived, I was over the moon. I rushed home to tell my dad, my heart pounding with excitement. I found both him and Vanessa in the living room. My dad was thrilled when I shared the news, immediately suggesting we go out to celebrate. But before we could make plans, Vanessa cleared her throat and said she had an announcement of her own. She was pregnant. The room went silent. I watched as my dad's face transformed from shock to joy. He hugged Vanessa tightly, then turned to me with a big smile, saying how wonderful it was that our family was growing. I tried to smile back, but inside, I felt like I was shrinking, becoming invisible. Don't get me wrong, I was happy for them in a way. I knew my dad had always wanted more kids. But the timing felt deliberate. Like Vanessa had chosen that exact moment to steal my thunder. From that day forward, all the focus was on the baby. My college plans became an afterthought, mentioned only in passing amidst discussions of nursery colors and baby names. I left for college feeling conflicted. On one hand, I was excited for this new chapter in my life, the chance to start fresh and make my own way. On the other, I felt like I was being replaced, like my role in the family was becoming obsolete. My half-sister, Lily, was born during my freshman year. I came home for the birth, determined to be a good big sister despite my complicated feelings. But watching Vanessa with Lily was like salt in a wound. She doted on the baby in a way she had never done with me, cooing and cuddling and seeming to relish her role as a mother. Over the next few years, I threw myself into my studies. I'd come home for holidays and brief visits, but I always felt like an outsider in my own family. Vanessa and Lily were inseparable, and my dad seemed content with his new family. There were times when I'd catch him looking at me with a mixture of pride and guilt, but he never said anything, and neither did I. Which brings us to my college graduation. 4 years of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices had paid off. I was graduating summa cum laude with a double major. My dad had promised he'd be there, front and center. I had even splurged on an extra ticket, hoping against hope that Vanessa might come too, that we might have a moment of connection. The morning of the ceremony, I got a call from my dad. My stomach dropped as soon as I heard his voice. I knew what was coming before he even said it. Lily had a dance recital, and Vanessa insisted they couldn't miss it. My dad apologized profusely, saying he'd make it up to me, that we'd have a special celebration when I came home. I was devastated. This was supposed to be my moment, the culmination of years of hard work. And once again, Vanessa and Lily took precedence. I went through the graduation ceremony in a daze, fighting back tears as I watched my classmates celebrate with their families. The extra seat I'd saved remained painfully empty. That night, as I sat alone in my dorm room surrounded by packing boxes, I made a decision. I was done being an afterthought in my own family. I was done competing for attention and affection. I declined my dad's offer to have a belated celebration and told him I needed some time. I accepted a job offer in a city across the country and moved within weeks of graduating. It's been 4 months since then. My dad has called and texted numerous times, begging me to talk to him. Vanessa even reached out once, with a half-hearted apology about the graduation. I've responded minimally, mostly to let them know I'm alive and well. Part of me feels guilty for cutting them off, especially Lily. She's innocent in all this, and I do love her, despite the complicated feelings I have about her place in our family. But I can't bring myself to go back to that dynamic where I'm always second best, always the afterthought. Am I wrong for wanting to keep my distance? Should I give them another chance? I'm building a life for myself here, making friends and focusing on my career. But there's still a part of me that aches for the family I thought I was going to have, for the relationship with my dad that I feel like I've lost. I don't know what the right answer is. All I know is that for now, the thought of going back, of trying to fit myself into a family where I don't seem to belong, is too painful to bear. So I'm staying away, trying to heal, and hoping that someday, I'll figure out what family really means to me. Update 1, it's been about 2 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. Your comments really helped me gain perspective on my situation and gave me the courage to take some difficult steps. After much reflection, I decided to have an honest conversation with my dad. I realized that running away and cutting off contact wasn't solving anything, it was just prolonging the pain for both of us. So, I called him and asked if we could meet in person. He agreed immediately, even offering to fly out to see me. We settled on meeting halfway, in a neutral city. The day of our meeting, I was a bundle of nerves. We met at a quiet cafe, and as soon as I saw my dad, I was struck by how much older he looked. There were new lines on his face, and his hair seemed grayer than I remembered. He hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I felt like a little girl again, safe in my daddy's arms. But then we sat down, and the weight of everything unsaid hung heavy between us. I took a deep breath and started talking. I laid out everything I'd been feeling for years, the hurt, the resentment, the feeling of being replaced. I told him about how it felt to always come second to Vanessa and Lily, how his missed presence at my graduation was just the final straw in a long line of disappointments. As I spoke, I watched my dad's face crumble. He listened without interrupting, tears streaming down his face. When I finished, he reached across the table and took my hands in his. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I failed you as a father." What followed was hours of intense, emotional conversation. My dad opened up in a way he never had before. He told me things I never knew, like how Vanessa had threatened to leave him early in their marriage if he coddled me too much. He admitted that he was so afraid of losing her and Lily, of being alone again, that he went along with it. It wasn't an excuse, he said, but he wanted me to understand. I also learned that my dad and Vanessa have been having problems for a while now. He said my graduation was a wake-up call for him. He realized how much he'd sacrificed his relationship with me for a marriage that wasn't even making him happy. He told me about the fights they'd had since then, how Vanessa refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. She maintained that Lily's recital was just as important as my graduation and that I was being selfish for not understanding that. As he spoke, memories flooded back, times when I'd overheard hushed arguments, moments when I caught tension between them that I couldn't explain. It all started to make sense, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. We talked about my childhood, about the years when it was just the two of us. My dad reminisced about taking me to the park every Saturday, about how proud he was when I learned to ride a bike without training wheels. "Those were the happiest years of my life," he said, squeezing my hand. I don't know when or how I lost sight of that. As our conversation went on, I found myself opening up too. I told him about how lonely I'd felt in college, How I'd throw myself into my studies because it was easier than dealing with the pain of feeling replaced. I admitted that there were times when I'd considered reaching out to my birth mom, just to have some connection to a maternal figure, but I never went through with it out of loyalty to him. By the time we finished talking, the cafe was closing around us. We'd spent the entire day there, laying bare years of hurt and misunderstandings. It wasn't a magic fix, there was still a lot of pain and a lot of healing to be done. But it felt like a start. We ended our meeting with a tentative plan to rebuild our relationship. My dad promised to come visit me, just the two of us, in a month. He also said he was going to start therapy to work through his issues and become a better father. He even floated the idea of couples counseling with Vanessa, though he wasn't sure she'd agree to it. As for Vanessa, my feelings are still complicated. While I understand a bit better now why she acted the way she did, it doesn't erase years of feeling unwanted and pushed aside. I made it clear to my dad that I'm not ready to have her in my life right now, maybe not ever. He said he understood and would respect my wishes. Lily is another complicated issue. I love my little sister, despite everything. But I don't know how to have a relationship with her without Vanessa being involved. For now, I've asked my dad to pass along some small gifts and cards to her from me. It's not ideal, but it's the best I can do right now. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. I love my dad, and I want him in my life. But I've also made it clear that things need to change. I won't go back to being an afterthought or feeling like I have to compete for his attention. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm focusing on my job and building a life for myself in my new city. I'm also considering starting therapy myself to work through my childhood issues and learn how to build healthy relationships. I know we have a long road ahead of us. Years of hurt and misunderstandings can't be erased in a single conversation. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like there's hope. Hope that my dad and I can rebuild our relationship. Hope that I can heal from the pain of the past. And hope that maybe, just maybe, I can figure out what family means to me. I'll update again after my dad's visit. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It truly means more than I can express. Update 2. Hey everyone, it's been about 3 months since my last update, and I wanted to share what's been happening. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, to say the least. My dad came to visit as promised. I was nervous about spending an entire weekend with him, we hadn't had that much one-on-one time in years. But as soon as he arrived, it was like no time had passed. We fell into our old routines, joking and talking like we used to when I was little. I showed him around my new city, taking him to my favorite coffee shop and the park where I go running. He seemed genuinely interested in my life, asking questions about my job and my friends. It felt good to share this part of my life with him, to let him see the person I've become. We had some deep conversations too. One night, over dinner at my apartment, he opened up about his relationship with my birth mom. He told me stories I'd never heard before, how they met in college, their whirlwind romance, and the difficult years leading up to their separation. It was strange to hear about this part of his life, to imagine him as a young man in love. It made me see him in a new light, not just as my dad, but as a person with his own history and heartbreaks. But there were also tense moments. He brought up Vanessa and Lily a lot, which I wasn't prepared for. He told me that he and Vanessa were in couples therapy, trying to work things out. Part of me was happy he was getting help, but another part felt betrayed. I guess I had hoped that after our talk, he would leave her. It was a reminder that despite our progress, there was still a gulf between us. The real bombshell came on the last day of his visit. We were having breakfast at a local diner when he dropped the news: Vanessa was pregnant again. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. All I could think was, not again. I tried to hide my reaction, to be supportive. After all, I know my dad loves being a father. But I couldn't help feeling like history was repeating itself. Once again, a new baby was overshadowing an important moment in my life, this time, the rebuilding of my relationship with my dad. My dad must have sensed my unease because he quickly assured me that things would be different this time. He promised that he wouldn't let the new baby come between us, that he'd make sure to prioritize our relationship. But I've heard promises like that before, and it was hard to believe them. After he left, I spent a lot of time thinking about our visit, and what this new development meant for our relationship. I realized that while we've made progress in healing our relationship, I'm not ready to be part of a family unit that includes Vanessa. The thought of attending family gatherings or holidays with her still makes me anxious and angry. So, I made a difficult decision. I called my dad and told him that while I'm happy to continue building our relationship, it needs to be separate from his life with Vanessa and the kids. No joint vacations, no family dinners. Just him and me. He was quiet for a long moment after I said this. When he finally spoke, I could hear the hurt in his voice. But he said he understood and would respect my wishes. We've set up a schedule for regular phone calls and visits, just the two of us. As for Lily and the new baby, I'm still figuring that out. I've started sending Lily little gifts and cards, trying to establish some kind of connection without involving Vanessa. It's not ideal, but it's the best I can do right now. I've also asked my dad to send me updates and pictures of Lily, so I can at least feel like I'm part of her life in some small way. I know this isn't a perfect solution, and it might not work long term. But for now, it's what I need to protect my mental health and continue healing. I've started seeing a therapist, which has been incredibly helpful in processing all of these complicated emotions. My therapist suggested that I start journaling, and it's been eye-opening to see my thoughts and feelings on paper. I've realized that a lot of my anger towards Vanessa is really hurt and fear, hurt from feeling rejected, and fear of being replaced or forgotten. It doesn't excuse her actions, but understanding my own emotions better has helped me feel more in control. Work has been a welcome distraction through all of this. I've thrown myself into my job, and it's paying off. I recently got a promotion, which has been a huge boost to my confidence. It feels good to be recognized for my hard work, especially after years of feeling overlooked. I've also been making an effort to build a support system here in my new city. I've joined a book club and a hiking group, and I'm slowly making friends. It's not always easy, there are still days when I feel lonely and miss the idea of a close-knit family. But I'm learning that family doesn't always have to be the one you're born into. As I write this update, I'm acutely aware that I'm at a crossroads. I'm building a life for myself, one that I'm proud of. But I'm also trying to maintain a connection to my past, to the family I grew up with. It's a delicate balance, and I'm not always sure I'm getting it right. I don't know what the future holds. Will my dad and Vanessa's marriage survive another baby? Will I ever be able to have a relationship with Lily and this new sibling? Can my dad and I truly rebuild our relationship while I keep the rest of his family at arm's length? These are questions I don't have answers to yet. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm focusing on my own growth and healing, on building a life that makes me happy. And I'm cautiously nurturing my relationship with my dad, setting boundaries where I need to, but also trying to be open to the possibility of change and growth. Thank you all for your continued support and advice. It means more than you know to have this community to turn to. I'll update again when there are new developments. Update 3. Hi everyone. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some significant developments in my family situation. The biggest news is that my dad and Vanessa have separated. It turns out that the pregnancy I mentioned in my last update was a false alarm. The stress of that situation, coupled with their ongoing issues, led to them deciding to take a break. My dad called me to tell me the news himself. I could hear the mix of sadness and relief in his voice. He's moved out and is living in an apartment nearby. He's continuing with therapy and has been making a real effort to be present in my life. We talk on the phone at least once a week, and he's visited me twice in the last few months. During his last visit, we had another long, honest conversation about our family situation. He admitted that he had been unhappy in his marriage for a long time but had been staying for Lily's sake. He also acknowledged how unfair that had been to me, constantly pushing my needs aside for the sake of his new family. It was a difficult conversation, but a necessary one. We talked about how we could move forward, how we could rebuild our relationship without the shadow of Vanessa looming over us. My dad expressed regret for not standing up for me more, for letting Vanessa dictate the terms of our family dynamic for so long. As for Vanessa, I haven't had any direct contact with her. My dad says she's been surprisingly civil about the separation, which makes me wonder if she was as unhappy as he was. Part of me is curious about her side of the story, but I'm not ready to reach out to her yet. Maybe someday, but not now. Lily is struggling with the change, which breaks my heart. She's only 7, and this must be so confusing for her. I've been sending her more frequent letters and small gifts, trying to be a stable presence in her life even from a distance. My dad has been bringing her to our video calls sometimes, which has been nice. She's growing up so fast, and I don't want to miss it all, despite the complicated circumstances. I've also started therapy myself, working through my abandonment issues and learning to set healthy boundaries. It's been challenging but incredibly helpful. My therapist has been helping me understand that it's okay to have complicated feelings about my family, that love and resentment can coexist, and that healing is a process, not a destination. One unexpected outcome of all this is that I've reconnected with my birth mom. After talking it through with my therapist, I reached out to her on social media. We've had a few phone calls, and while I don't think we'll ever have a typical mother-daughter relationship, it's been healing to hear her side of the story and to let go of some of the blame I've carried all these years. Our conversations have been eye-opening. She shared her struggles with postpartum depression and how overwhelmed she felt as a young mother. It doesn't excuse her leaving, but it helps me understand it better. We're taking things slow, just getting to know each other as adults. It's strange and sometimes uncomfortable, but also oddly freeing. Work continues to be a bright spot in my life. I've been given more responsibilities at my job, and I'm considering going back to school for a master's degree. It feels good to have goals and aspirations that are just for me, not tied to anyone else's expectations. Looking ahead, I'm cautiously optimistic. My relationship with my dad is stronger than it's been in years. We're both putting in the effort to communicate openly and honestly, even when it's difficult. I'm building a life I love in my new city, with friends who feel like family and a career I'm passionate about. And while the situation with Lily and Vanessa is still complicated, I feel like I'm in a better place to navigate it. I'm hoping that as Lily gets older, we can develop a relationship that's just ours, separate from the history with her mom. I don't know what the future holds, whether my dad and Vanessa will reconcile, how my role as a big sister might evolve, or what kind of relationship I'll end up having with my birth mom. But for the first time in a long time, I feel equipped to handle whatever comes my way. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and encouragement have been invaluable. I may not update as frequently going forward, but know that your words have made a real difference in my life. Here's to healing, growth, and the families we choose for ourselves.